The cause of death was listed as smoke inhalation and thermal trauma, but the medical examiner disagreed on one critical aspect. Positive identification of the deceased was achieved through a distinctive frontal sinus pattern comparison. This unique biometric identifier, preserved despite the complete destruction of soft tissue and fingerprints due to intense fire exposure, provided definitive proof of identity where traditional methods failed. The gap in this forensic record, the inability to identify the remains using conventional means, became the very key to unlocking the truth about who perished in the blaze. The examination revealed that while every other physical characteristic was obliterated by extreme heat, the frontal sinus morphology remained intact and distinctive, allowing for an accurate match with premortem X-rays. This case underscores the importance of recognizing alternative biometric markers when conventional identification methods are compromised. Chapter: Case Background. The incident occurred on a cold winter evening in suburban Chicago, approximately 2 years ago. A neighbor reported noticing smoke emanating from the residence of an elderly couple known for their reclusive lifestyle. Emergency services arrived promptly to find the house engulfed in flames. Despite the best efforts of firefighters, they were unable to rescue anyone alive from the burning structure. Initial observations at the scene indicated that the fire had spread rapidly, consuming much of the property's interior and leaving only charred remains. The subsequent investigation revealed no evidence of forced entry or foul play. All soft tissue and identifiable personal effects had been consumed by the intense heat, rendering traditional methods of identification ineffective. Fingerprints were similarly destroyed, complicating efforts to establish the identity of the deceased. With conventional means exhausted, forensic experts turned to less common avenues for positive victim identification. Chapter: Initial findings. Upon arrival at the scene, first responders noted a fully engulfed structure with heavy smoke and flames. Inside, they located human remains in an advanced state of decomposition due to extreme heat exposure. No visible external features or personal effects were discernible upon initial examination. The body was positioned supine on the floor amidst debris. Initial medical assessment by emergency personnel classified the manner of death as suspicious pending further investigation. The absence of identifiable markers, such as fingerprints, dental records, or distinguishing tattoos, necessitated alternative identification methods. Given the extensive fire damage and complete destruction of all soft tissue, investigators suspected a case of positive identification through unique biometric features that survive intense thermal trauma. This led to an immediate call for forensic specialists trained in advanced victim identification techniques. Chapter: Forensic investigation. Upon arrival at the fire-ravaged scene, investigators meticulously documented the extent of damage using detailed photographs and sketches. Amidst the debris, a small, calcified bone fragment was recovered from beneath the charred remains. This fragment was identified as part of the frontal sinus region based on its anatomical location and distinctive shape. A chain of custody form was immediately initiated to document the item's transfer from scene to the forensic laboratory. Notable in this collection was the absence of any soft tissue or fingerprints, which typically provide critical identification markers. However, the presence of a unique bony structure offered an alternative method for positive identification through comparison with premortem medical records. This evidence underscored the robustness and adaptability of forensic identification techniques. Upon arrival at the laboratory, the skeletal remains were subjected to a thorough examination for potential identification markers. Given the extensive thermal damage and absence of soft tissue and fingerprints, radiographic analysis was prioritized. Premortem X-rays were retrieved from medical records and compared against post-mortem images focusing on the frontal sinus morphology. The unique pattern of numerization within the frontal bone confirmed a high degree of individuality consistent with the deceased's pre-existing records. Histological sections were prepared to assess any residual tissue within the sinuses, though expected findings revealed only fragmented collagen fibers indicative of thermal alteration. Microscopic analysis did not yield viable soft tissue for DNA extraction due to extreme heat damage. However, digital overlays confirmed an exact match between the pre- and post-mortem sinus patterns, securing positive identification through this uniquely stable biometric feature. The timeline reconstruction began with an analysis of the fire's origin and spread patterns. Burnt debris indicated a rapid escalation from initial ignition to complete structural collapse within 30 minutes. The postmortem interval was estimated using insect activity on remaining skeletal remains, suggesting death occurred approximately 48 hours before discovery. This timeframe corroborated witness accounts placing the deceased at home prior to the fire's outbreak. Forensic entomology and thermoluminescence dating of bone fragments confirmed the sequence. Ignition around midnight, rapid combustion, and structural collapse within 30 minutes thereafter. Critical evidence emerged through comparison of pre-mortem X-rays with post-fire remains, focusing on the unique morphology of the frontal sinus. Despite extensive thermal damage to soft tissues and loss of fingerprints, the distinctive frontal sinus pattern allowed for positive identification of the deceased. This method underscored the reliability of biometric features beyond traditional fingerprint analysis in extreme cases of fire-related destruction. In this case, the frontal sinus pattern provided critical biometric data for positive identification of the deceased. The morphology of the frontal sinuses, as observed in post-mortem imaging, and compared to pre-mortem X-rays, exhibited unique characteristics that were consistent with individual identity. This method is particularly efficacious when traditional means, such as fingerprints, are unavailable due to extreme thermal damage. Expert testimony would confirm that while fingerprint analysis was inconclusive due to fire destruction, the frontal sinus morphology offered a definitive match. The evidence from the frontal sinuses was conclusive and not subject to interpretation, allowing for a clear identification of the deceased based on irrefutable anatomical uniqueness. Chapter Resolution: The investigation into the death of the deceased concluded after a meticulous analysis of unique anatomical structures that survived the intense heat, providing positive identification through forensic means previously deemed unlikely. The evidence from the frontal sinuses was conclusive and not subject to interpretation, allowing for a clear identification of the deceased based on irrefutable anatomical uniqueness. Initial assessment had suggested fingerprint and facial recognition would be insufficient due to extensive damage from fire. However, the frontal sinus patterns, recognized as uniquely individualized in their morphology, emerged as crucial evidence. This area's ability to retain its distinctive configuration, despite thermal destruction, offered a definitive pathway for positive identification. Pre-mortem medical records, including X-rays, were compared with post-mortem remains, confirming a match based on specific and consistent sinus architecture. The use of the frontal sinuses as a biometric identifier represents an advancement in forensic science methodology, ensuring that even when conventional means fail, unique biological markers remain available for identification purposes. This case underscores the critical role of alternative biometric markers in extreme circumstances where traditional methods fail. The frontal sinus pattern, uniquely preserved through intense heat, offers a reliable means for positive identification. Such forensic advancements ensure that no victim is left unnamed. The file remains open,